Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya. Naram Chev Narottamam. Devim Saraswatim Vyasam. Tato Jayamudiriye. Nashtuprayeshu Bhadreshu. Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya. Bhagavati Uttam Shloke. Bhaktir Bhavati Naishiki. So continuing with the discussion on Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 5, Chapter 8, a description of the character of Bharat Maharaj, text number 8 onwards. So translation, gradually Maharaj Bharat became very affectionate toward the deer. He began to raise it and maintain it by giving it grass. He was always careful to protect it from the attacks of tigers and other animals. When it itched, he petted it, and in this way he always tried to keep it in a comfortable condition. He sometimes kissed it out of love. Being attached to raising the deer, Maharaj Bharat forgot the rules and regulations for the advancement of spiritual life. And he gradually forgot to worship the Supreme Personality of Godhead. After a few days, he forgot everything about his spiritual advancement. So that was a mistake. That's where he made a mistake. From this, we can understand how we have to be very cautious in executing our spiritual duties by observing the rules and regulations and regularly chanting the Hare Krishna Mahamantra. If we neglect doing this, we will eventually fall down. We must rise early in the morning, bathe, attend Mangala worship the deities, chant the Hare Krishna mantra, study the Vedic literatures, and follow all the rules prescribed by the acharyas and the spiritual master. If we deviate from this process, we may fall down, even though we may be very highly advanced. So Bharat Maharaj was very highly advanced. He was at the stage of bhava when he was worshipping the deity. He was in his bhav stage. He was worshipping, but then slowly, because of his attachment to the deer, he fell down. As stated in Bhagavad Gita, acts of sacrifice, charity, and penance are not to be given up, but should be performed. Indeed, acts of sacrifice, charity, and penance purify even the great soul. Even if one is in the renounced order, he should never give up the regulative principles. He should worship the deity and give his time and life to the service of Krishna. He should also continue following the rules and regulations of austerity and penance. These things cannot be given up. One should not think oneself very advanced simply because one has accepted the sannyas order. The activities of Bharat Maharaj should be carefully studied for one's spiritual advancement. So all the rules and regulations and all the procedures or whatever activities we have to do to keep even after that, it's difficult to keep the consciousness purified or keep our thought process always in Krishna. Even after doing all this, it's difficult. So what to speak of if somebody doesn't do it? And it's also funny when we do all this chanting and reading and deity worship and darshan and prasad and class over and over again. And people say, oh, you don't do it with a sincere heart. You don't do it. Your mind is always deviating. So what's the point in doing it? Well, the point in doing it is this is the way we'll get attached, and our mind will slowly come to the focus. If we don't even do this, how in the world we expect our mind to get focused? People sometimes they quote these words of Kabir Das, man ka fere, man ka hoye, something like that. Okay, yeah, we understand. Ultimately, it is. We have to concentrate our mind. But how in the world we're going to do that without following the rules and regulations? It's not like all of a sudden one day we're going to get up in the morning and our mind will be fully focused on Krishna without practicing. It's not like any switch we turn on and off. No. It requires regular practice, more and more and more and more practice. So that's why acts of sacrifice, charity, and penance are not to be given up. Text 9. The great King Maharaj Bharat began to think, alas, this helpless young deer, by the force of time, an agent of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, has now lost its relatives and friends and has taken shelter of me. It does not know anyone but me, as I have become his father, mother, brother, and relatives. This deer is thinking in this way, and it has full faith in me. It does not know anyone but me. Therefore, I should not be envious and think that for the deer, my own welfare will be destroyed. I should certainly raise, protect, gratify, and fondle it. When it has taken shelter with me, how can I neglect it? Even though the deer is disturbing my spiritual life, I realize that a helpless person who has taken shelter cannot be neglected. That would be a great fault. When a person is advanced in spiritual consciousness or Krishna consciousness, he naturally becomes very sympathetic toward all living entities suffering in the material world. Actually, even if we study the chakras of the body, so when somebody is spiritually advanced, his crown chakra opens up a lot, and it's not because of any. Even crown chakra can also become bigger if there is any problem, any disease. But this opening is because of the spirituality, spiritual potency that is coming in. And at the same time, if the spiritual potency is coming and we don't open the heart chakra, which makes one very sympathetic, very compassionate, very loving, then there could be problem also. Then one can become very proud or very mad, kind of, in a wrong way, because so much of energy is coming in. So the heart chakra has to open up. So one has to become sympathetic and naturally become sympathetic if he's properly utilizing, channelizing that energy. So naturally, such an advanced person thinks of the suffering of people in general. However, if one does not know the material sufferings of fallen souls and becomes sympathetic because of bodily comforts, as in the case of Bharat Maharaj, such sympathy or compassion is a cause of one's fall down. If one is actually sympathetic to fallen, suffering humanity, he should try to elevate people from material consciousness to spiritual consciousness. As far as the deer was concerned, Bharat Maharaj became very sympathetic, but he forgot that it was impossible for him to elevate a deer to spiritual consciousness, because after all, a deer is but an animal. It was very dangerous for Bharat Maharaj to sacrifice all his regulative principles simply to take care of an animal. The principles enunciated in Bhagavad Gita should be followed. As far as the material body is concerned, we cannot do anything for anyone. However, by the grace of Krishna, we may raise a person to spiritual consciousness if we ourselves follow the rules and regulations. If we give up our own spiritual activities and simply become concerned with the bodily comforts of others, we will fall into a dangerous position. So this is where Bharat Maharaj made a mistake. He was right in saving the deer, because the deer was about to die in that river. But where he made a mistake was he got very attached to the deer and he forgot his spiritual practices. So that was a test. And I won't say he failed, but he just didn't pass it with flying colors. But Krishna is Krishna, and he says, because any progress we make on the path of yoga, it's always there. So he will carry on from wherever he lives. So the real, as Prabhupada says, the real compassion or mercy or service is towards raising somebody's Krishna consciousness or spiritual consciousness. Text 14. Nunam hi arya sadhva upashamashila kripan suhrid evam vidarte swarthanapi guru tarano pekshante. Even though one is in the renounced order, one who is advanced certainly feels compassion for suffering living entities. One should certainly neglect his own personal interests, although they may be very important to protect one who has surrendered. Maya is very strong. This is how Prabhupada starts his purport. In the name of philanthropy, altruism, and communism, people are feeling compassion for suffering humanity throughout the world. Philanthropists and altruists do not realize that it is impossible to improve people's material conditions. Material conditions are already established by the superior administration according to one's karma. They cannot be changed. The only benefit we can render to suffering beings is to try to raise them to spiritual consciousness. Material comforts cannot be increased or decreased. It is therefore said in Srimad Bhagavatam, Tal labhyate dukhvad anya prasukham. As far as material happiness is concerned, that comes without effort, just as tribulations come without any effort. Material happiness and pain can be attained without endeavor. One should not bother for material activities. If one is at all sympathetic or able to do good to others, he should endeavor to raise people to Krishna consciousness. In this way, everyone advances spiritually by the grace of the Lord. For our instruction, Bharat Maharaj acted in such a way. We should be very careful not to be misled by the so-called welfare activities conducted in worldly terms. One should not give up his interest in attaining the favor of Lord Vishnu at any cost. Generally, people do not know this or they forget it. Consequently, they sacrifice their original interest in the attainment of Vishnu's favor and engage in philanthropic activities for bodily comfort. So these philanthropic or altruistic activities, they actually sound very nice, and generally people get attracted toward doing those activities, and you can generate lots of funds to do those activities. Because people just, whatever they see, that okay, somebody is suffering, somebody is hungry, somebody is loitering on the streets, and somebody has no clothes, it just makes sense to give them food or clothes or shelter. And this is also done, obviously, but better charity is to raise somebody's Krishna consciousness. At the same time, we have to understand, I mean, if somebody is hungry on the street, and if we say, oh, take this bead and start chanting, and he will just throw away the beads. So it's a very tricky situation. So yeah, we want to help people spiritually, but at the same time, we have to do some material services. So if you want to feed somebody prasadam. So his stomach is full and he has also made some spiritual advancement. But still, it's not actually enough for the suffering humanity. There's so many people suffering so much. And there are so many people doing so many services as well for those suffering people. But just like Prabhupada said, we cannot, it is impossible to improve people's material conditions. They're already established by the superior administration based on those, on the karma of those people. So only way we can change, even help them to change their karma is by engaging them in bhakti. That's the only way. Karmani nirdhati kintu cha bhakti bhaja. But that too has to be done in a very compassionate, very service mode. And it's even though we want to give somebody, say it is cold outside, and we want to give blankets to poor people. And this is what I have also seen. I've seen it in Ludhiana when I was there. Ludhiana is a place where blankets are manufactured. And there are so many poor people on the road suffering in the cold weather. So we did blanket drive. But then what we heard and what we saw, these beggars, they would get tons of blankets because everybody wants to give blankets. So they would get 20, 30 blankets. And what do? They don't need 20, 30 blankets, so they would sell it in the market again. So that's also not a good proposal, good idea. So that's, I mean, of course, I'm not saying everybody is not genuine. There are genuine people also suffering. And also, if we know the truth behind people begging on the streets, there could be mafia behind it, gangs behind it. There's so many things, so many stuff goes on, and so much of stuff goes on. So it's very difficult. So best is to help somebody advance spiritually. That's the best thing to do. Iti kritanu shang asana shayanatan sanan shan adishu swaham big jahuna snehanu baddha hirdaya asita. Due to attachment for the deer, Maharaj Bharat lay down with it, walked about with it, bathed with it, and even ate with it. Thus his heart became bound to the deer in affection. Textual. When Maharaj Bharat wanted to enter the forest to collect kusha grass, flowers, wood, leaves, fruits, roots, and water, he would fear that dogs, jackals, tigers, and other ferocious animals might kill the deer. He would therefore always take the deer with him when entering the forest. So he won't even leave the deer in the ashram, unprotected. How Bharat Maharaj increased his affection for the deer is described herein. Even such an exalted personality as Bharat Maharaj, who had attained loving affection for the Supreme Personality of Godhead, fell down from his position due to his affection for some animal. Consequently, as will be seen, he had to accept the body of a deer in his next life. Since this was the case with Bharat Maharaj, what can we say of those who are not advanced in spiritual life, but who also become attached to cats and dogs? Due to their affection for the cats and dogs, they have to take the same bodily forms in the next life unless they clearly increase their affection and love for the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Unless we increase our faith in the Supreme Lord, we shall be attracted to many other things. That is the cause of our material bondage. So because of all this increased attachment, and so much increased that he even forgot his attachment for Krishna or to Narayan, because he was worshipping Narayan in the sun planet, the deity in the sun planet. And this is what Prabhupada is cautioning us the many times. People like to have cats and dogs as their pets in the house. And they get very attached to cats and dogs. Very, very attached. And then what will happen the next life? We can We can just imagine. Text 13. Pati shucha mugdha bhavena tatra tatra vikshaktam mati pranaya bhar hridaya karpanyat skandetnod vahati eva mukt sanga urasi chadhoyapa lalayan mudam paramamavapa. When entering the forest, the animal would appear very attractive to Maharaj Bharat due to his childish behavior. Maharaj Bharat would even take the deer on his shoulders and carry it due to the affection. His heart was so filled with great love for the deer that he would sometimes keep it on his lap or when sleeping on his chest. In this way, he felt great pleasure in fondling the animal. Maharaj Bharat left his home, wife, children, kingdom, and everything else to advance his spiritual life in the forest. But again, he fell victim to material affection due to his attachment to an insignificant pet deer. What then was the use of his renouncing his family? One who is serious in advancing his spiritual life should be very cautious not to become attached to anything but Krishna. Sometimes, in order to preach, we have to accept many material activities, but we should remember that everything is for Krishna. If we remember this, there is no chance of our being victimized by material activities. So this remember that everything is for Krishna can only happen when we do our practices properly, the chanting, the reading, the hearing, the services, the association, everything when we do it properly. Otherwise, there's always a chance that we go astray, that we deviate. Text 14. When Maharaj Bharat was actually worshipping the Lord or was engaged in some ritualistic ceremony, although his activities were unfinished, he would still at intervals get up and see where the deer was. In this way, he would look for it, and when he could see that the deer was comfortably situated, his mind and heart would be very satisfied, and he would bestow his blessings upon the deer, saying, "My dear calf, may you be happy in all respects." So that way he got really attached to that little deer. Because his attraction for the deer was so intense, Bharat Maharaj could not concentrate upon worshipping the Lord or performing his ritualistic ceremonies. Even though he was engaged in worshipping the deity, his mind was restless due to his inordinate affection. While trying to meditate, he would simply think of the deer, wondering where it had gone. In other words, if one's mind is distracted from worship, a mere show of worship will not be of any benefit. The fact that Bharat Maharaj had to get up at intervals to look for the deer was simply a sign that he had fallen down from the spiritual platform. So just think, Bharat Maharaj was in the forest, wonderful, completely mode of goodness atmosphere, and he was, before he met this deer, he was completely absorbed in the service of the Lord, meditating upon the Lord, doing all his activities for the Lord. We live in the cities, in the house, we have the family, and we have to take care of so many duties. So we have relatives, we have neighbors, we have to deal with, we have children, we have husband, wife, parents, in-laws, brothers, sisters, so many people to deal with, and so many places our attention can get diverted to. So we don't even know where our attention is going. So we have to be very careful and very strong in our bhakti, in our sadhana. We have to do that. Otherwise attachment and attention can go anywhere. Text 15. If Bharat Maharaj sometimes could not see the deer, his mind would be very agitated. He would become like a miser who have obtained some riches, had lost them, and had then become very unhappy. When the deer was gone, he would be filled with anxiety and would lament due to separation. Thus, he would become illusioned and speak as follows. If a poor man loses some money or gold, he at once becomes very agitated. Similarly, the mind of Bharat Maharaj would become agitated when he did not see the deer. This is an example of how our attachment can be transferred. If our attachment is transferred to the Lord's service, we progress. Srila Rupa Goswami prayed to the Lord that he would be as naturally attracted to the Lord's service as a young man and young woman are naturally attracted to each other. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu exhibited such attachment to the Lord when he jumped into the ocean or cried at night in separation. However, if our attachment is diverted to material things instead of to the Lord, we will fall down from the spiritual platform. Fall down can happen only if we have risen to that platform. We are not even at that platform. Our attachment is completely towards the material. Sometimes we get some glimpse of attachment to Krishna. Okay, mere glimpse, that's all. Attachment to his chanting, attachment to his holy name, attachment to the service, attachment to hearing and reading. Some glimpse we get. Otherwise, most of the times our services are just a routine duty that we are performing. But this is what we have to do. If our attachment is not towards Krishna, then it will be attached somewhere else. And that's what the material world is. And that way we get attracted and then the next life and next life and next life and next life. Text number 16. Bharat Maharaj would think, alas, the deer is now helpless. I am now very unfortunate and my mind is like a cunning hunter, for it is always filled with cheating propensities and cruelty. The deer has put its faith in me just as a good man who has a natural interest in good behavior forgets the misbehavior of a cunning friend and puts his faith in him. Although I have proved faithless, will this deer return and place its faith in me? Bharat Maharaj was very noble and exalted, and therefore when the deer was absent from him, he thought himself unworthy to give it protection. Due to his attachment for the animal, he thought that the animal was as noble and exalted as he himself was. According to the logic of Atmavat Manyate Jagat, everyone thinks of others according to his own position. Therefore, Bharat Maharaj felt that the deer had left him due to his negligence and that due to the animal's noble heart, it would again return. So much attachment he had developed. Now this is actually unheard of, this much attachment for an animal. But this is what Bharat Maharaj did. And that's where the fall down was. So anyway, we'll read more tomorrow. We'll stop here, see anybody has any questions or comments.
हरे कृष्ण प्रभु जी।
हरे कृष्ण मंत्र।
प्रभु जी, हम लोग तो हर किसी से अटैच हो जाते हैं। जरा सा कोई दो आंसू बहा दे, हम उससे अटैच हो जाते हैं। कोई सामान आ जाए, उससे अटैच हो जाते हैं। कुछ भी हो जाए, अपने कपड़ों से इतनी अटैचमेंट है। मतलब कोई कुछ ले जाए हमारे घर से तो हमें गुस्सा चढ़ जाता है, तो क्यों ले गया। थोड़ी देर बाद हम फिर थोड़ा ठीक हो जाता है। तो मतलब we just get attached with, सामने वाले पेड़ से भी अटैच हो जाते हैं, अपने फूलों से अटैच हो जाते हैं। क्या है हम लोगों की लाइफ? The small things, you know.
Yeah, वो तो है ही है।
Forget
वही
about
तो
the
है वो
animals and
attach।
all, बड़ी चीजें, टीवी, फ्रिज, सब चीजों से अटैच है हम लोग तो।
Yeah, but एक चीज है क्या, at least will not be born as fridge।
हमने मतलब आज की डेट में प्रभु जी इवन मोबाइल से भी इतनी अटैचमेंट है कि जरा सा नहीं नजर आएगा तो वी गेट सो दिस थिंग, अरे परेशान हो गए, घूम तो नहीं गया। These are the, मतलब forget about the living, you know, this thing कि भैया कोई पेरेंट्स हैं या उनसे हैं, बिल्कुल जड़ लोगों, जड़ चीजों से भी हम इतने अटैच हैं तो क्या हमारा हाल होगा,
Yeah,
है ना। मतलब मैं
ये
यही
तो
सोच
है।
रही थी कि हम लोग तो किचन में अपने बर्तनों से इतने अटैच हैं कि बस पूछो मत। एज अ बीइंग अ लेडी हो, वो भी कोई मांग ले तो नहीं नहीं नहीं, ये नहीं, ये तो बड़ा अच्छा है, हमको तुमको दूसरा ले देंगे। इट्स वेरी नॉर्मल सिचुएशन, बट
नहीं, ये बात सही है, एकदम सही है।
है ना। कोई
And
बेडशीट
as
मांग ले
men
तो
we
नहीं नहीं, ये बड़ी सुंदर बेडशीट है, ये तो हमने फलानी जगह से ली थी, यहाँ से ली थी, आई बॉट इट इन सो एक्सपेंसिव, आई विल नॉट गिव इट टू यू। सो मतलब ये
and
हमारा
men get attached to their gadgets, cars,
हाँ
mobile
हाँ
phones,
बिल्कुल,
laptops।
कार पे स्क्रैच भी आ जाए तो दे गेट सो फ्यूरियस।
Yeah,
क्या है
shoes, चप्पल के साथ attachment रहती है।
किचन वाली बात सही बताई आपने मतलब।
हाँ,
मैं बोला किचन के बर्तनों वाली बात सही बताई।
हाँ है ही है। मेरी क्रॉकरी है, मेरी प्लेट है, मेरा चम्मच है, क्या नॉनसेंस है।
यही तो खत्म करना है।
I know.
बट अटैचमेंट वही कृष्ण की तरफ होगी तो ये खत्म होएगा, नहीं तो नहीं होएगा।
छोड़ दो आज से माता, छोड़ दो, जो होना है जो होगा।
सही में सही प्रभु जी।
कैलाश मानसरोवर की तैयारी करो बस।
ठीक है, ये छूट जाए तो क्या बात है।
तो अनिमा माता ने लिखा ना, उनकी मदर ने पासपोर्ट उसके लिए बनाया, तो आई थिंक जब तक हम जाएंगे पासपोर्ट की जरूरत ही नहीं रहेगी।
चाइना हमारे साथ ही मिल जाएगा।
और क्या, वापस आ जाएगा। पासपोर्ट का क्या करना है फिर।
ऐसे कश्मीर में तो क्या हाल होगा, हमने तो ऐसे छोड़े चीजें।
माता जी saying something, I think.
क्या कह रहे हैं, समझ नहीं आया।
नीचा माता जी saying something, I think.
क्या कह रहे माता जी, निर्जा माता?
माता कह रही है कि हमने तो इसको एक बार भुगता है ना, कश्मीर से छोड़ के सब चीजें भी से दोबारा अटैचमेंट नहीं रखती है। चाहे फिर भी हो ही जाता है, जब दोबारा चीजें आ जाती हैं दोबारा अटैचमेंट हो जाती है।
या वो तो है ही है।
Oh Krishna. Thank you, Prabhuji.
I guess we can stop here. Thank you, Mom. Hare Krishna. Jai Shri Ram.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Jai Shri Ram.